Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, in the small town of Ajaccio on the island of Corsica. His family belonged to the Corsican nobility, but they were not wealthy. Napoleon had 3 brothers and 5 sisters. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, worked as a lawyer while his mother, Letizia Ramolino, took care of the family. Napoleon's childhood was pretty normal, but he had a strong interest in learning. He went to a local school where he studied history, geography, and math. Even as a kid, Napoleon loved reading about famous leaders and their military campaigns. This early fascination with military history would shape his future career. When Napoleon was just 9 years old in 1778, his father sent him to a military school in mainland France. It was a big change for him, as he had to leave his family and adapt to a new culture and language. Despite the challenges, he was determined to succeed and become a great soldier. In 1779, after spending a year at the Autumn Royal Military School, Napoleon joined the prestigious Brienne Military School in France. The school was known for its strict discipline and tough training, which aimed to prepare young boys for a military career. Napoleon was a dedicated student and worked hard to excel in his studies. He focused on subjects like math, history, and science, which would later prove useful in his military endeavors. However, life at the school wasn't easy for him. He struggled to fit in and often faced teasing from his classmates due to his Corsican accent and humble background. Despite these challenges, Napoleon's ambition and determination kept him going. He had a deep passion for the military, and he spent a lot of his free time reading about famous generals and their strategies. He also actively participated in military exercises and drills, showcasing his natural leadership skills. In 1784, when he was just 15 years old, Napoleon received a scholarship to the prestigious École Militaire in Paris. It was an amazing opportunity since it was one of the top military schools in France. He studied subjects like artillery, military strategy, and engineering, which would later prove crucial in his career. Unfortunately, his time at the École Militaire was cut short when his father passed away in 1785, leaving the family in financial trouble. This forced Napoleon to complete his studies quickly and join the army to support his family. At the age of 16, he became a second lieutenant in the French artillery, marking the beginning of his military journey. Through his education and early experiences, Napoleon developed a solid foundation in military knowledge and leadership. These skills would prove invaluable as he embarked on a path that would make him one of the most influential military leaders in history. Even at a young age, Napoleon had grand ambitions that surpassed his humble beginnings. He dreamed of making a significant impact on the world and becoming a powerful leader. This determination to succeed shaped his relationships and propelled him forward in his military and political career. During his early years in the military, Napoleon formed strong bonds with fellow soldiers and officers. His charisma, intelligence, and ability to inspire loyalty were well known. However, some also saw him as arrogant and distant because he was solely focused on achieving greatness and didn't easily form close friendships. Napoleon's love life was also influenced by his ambition. In 1795, Napoleon crossed paths with Joséphine de Beauharnais, a widow with 2 children from a previous marriage. Joséphine was a prominent socialite in Paris, and her connections proved to be advantageous for Napoleon's career. Despite their love for each other, their relationship was often plagued by issues such as jealousy, infidelity, and the demands of Napoleon's military campaigns. Nevertheless, Napoleon remained steadfast in his ambition to achieve greatness for himself and his country. He saw himself as a man of destiny, driven to rise through the ranks of the French military and establish himself as a leader in the political arena. With his reputation and connections, Napoleon eventually gained the opportunity to seize power and change the course of history. His early life, education, and relationships all played a crucial role in shaping his legacy. The French Revolution, which started in 1789, was a time of major changes in France. The revolutionaries wanted to get rid of the monarchy and create a fairer and more democratic society. This chaotic period gave Napoleon the chance to show off his skills as a military leader and move up in his career. As the revolution progressed, the French army faced many challenges, like internal conflicts and battles with other European countries. Napoleon, who was a captain at the time, was stationed in southern France and took part in the siege of Toulon in 1793. This city had been taken over by royalist forces, supported by the British Navy. Napoleon's clever strategies and effective use of artillery played a key role in recapturing Toulon and achieving a significant victory for France. His success caught the attention of the French government, and he was promoted to brigadier general at just 24 years old. This rapid rise in rank showed his exceptional abilities and ambition. The French Revolution also caused political instability, with different groups competing for power. In 1795, the new government faced a threat from royalists who wanted to overthrow it. They turned to Napoleon for help, and he swiftly dealt with the rebellion using a clever tactic called whiff of grapeshot. By concentrating artillery fire, he quickly put an end to the uprising. This decisive action not only earned him more recognition, but also the gratitude of the government. In the years that followed the French Revolution, Napoleon continued to build his reputation through his military skills and strategic brilliance. His victories on the battlefield and his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of revolutionary France set the stage for his rise to power. As he gained more influence and respect, Napoleon's ambitions grew, eventually leading him to seize the highest office in the country and forever altering the course of French history. While his military successes were crucial, Napoleon's adept political maneuvering was equally significant. During the turbulent years after the French Revolution, he carefully navigated the intricate political landscape, aligning himself with the right factions and seizing opportunities to advance his career. In 1796, Napoleon was appointed commander of the French army in Italy. This role not only allowed him to display his military brilliance, but also allowed him to form political alliances. He skillfully negotiated treaties and forged alliances with different Italian states, which helped secure France's position in the region. Napoleon quickly gained fame and influence as he led the French army to a series of victories in Italy. His triumphs on the battlefield translated into political power as he became increasingly involved in governing the territories he conquered. He implemented effective reforms in administration, education, and taxation, showcasing his ability to govern efficiently. Meanwhile, back in France, the government was plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and power struggles. The Directory, a committee of 5 members that ruled France from 1795 to 1799, was widely disliked and unable to maintain stability. Recognizing an opportunity to strengthen his position, Napoleon aligned himself with influential political figures who shared his vision for a more centralized and efficient government. In 1799, he participated in the coup of 18 Brumaire, a plot to overthrow the Directory and establish a new government led by 3 consuls. The coup succeeded, and Napoleon was appointed as the first consul, granting him significant power and control over the French government. Through strategic alliances and political maneuvering, he had successfully ascended to the highest office in the country. As the first consul, Napoleon implemented a series of reforms aimed at improving the efficiency and stability of the French government. He restructured the legal system, established a national bank, and reorganized the education system. These reforms not only consolidated his power, but also garnered support from the French people, who viewed him as a strong and capable leader. Napoleon's political maneuvering, along with his military triumphs, set the stage for his eventual rise to emperor. By deftly navigating the intricate world of revolutionary politics, he solidified his position as one of history's most influential leaders. As the first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte wielded significant power over the French government. His main goal was to restore stability to the country after the tumultuous French Revolution. With his astute political instincts and strong leadership abilities, he embarked on a series of reforms that would shape France for years to come. One of Napoleon's initial tasks as first consul was to establish a new constitution. The Constitution of the Year 8, adopted in 1799, granted him executive authority, and the power to appoint ministers, generals, and other high-ranking officials. This centralized system of governance allowed him to maintain control over both domestic and foreign affairs. Napoleon focused on revitalizing the economy, which had suffered greatly during the Revolution. He introduced a new currency known as the franc, which stabilized the economy and facilitated trade. Additionally, he founded the Bank of France, which centralized financial control and provided loans to businesses and the government. To combat the widespread corruption and inefficiency within the French government, Napoleon reformed the civil service. He implemented a merit-based system where officials were appointed based on their qualifications and performance rather than their connections. This reform led to a more efficient and effective administration, ultimately strengthening the French state. Napoleon also understood the significance of maintaining law and order to ensure stability. He enlisted a team of legal experts to develop a fresh civil code, which later became known as the Napoleonic Code. This comprehensive set of laws simplified and modernized the French legal system, guaranteeing equal treatment for all citizens. As the first consul, Napoleon expanded France's territories through military conquests. He achieved peace with Austria in the Treaty of Luneville in 1801 and resolved the long-standing conflict between the French government and the Catholic Church through the Concordat of 1801 with Pope Pius VII. In 1802, a new constitution extended Napoleon's term indefinitely, further solidifying his position as first consul. By 1804, his power and influence had grown to such an extent that he declared himself Emperor of the French, marking the beginning of the First French Empire. Napoleon's time as first consul laid the foundation for his future reign as emperor. Through his ambitious reforms and unwavering pursuit of power, he transformed France into a formidable and stable nation that would soon exert dominance over much of Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte's Italian campaign, which occurred from 1796 to 1797, marked one of his earliest significant military endeavors as a commander. It demonstrated his tactical brilliance and his ability to motivate his troops, resulting in a string of impressive victories against the Austrian and Italian forces. At the beginning of the campaign, the French army was ill-equipped and demoralized. However, Napoleon's charm and leadership swiftly lifted the soldiers' spirits. Through his speeches and promises of wealth and glory, he ignited their fighting spirit. Napoleon's strategy during the Italian campaign involved dividing and conquering the enemy forces. He adeptly exploited the weaknesses of the Austrian and Italian armies by swiftly moving and attacking their most vulnerable points. This approach enabled him to secure a series of decisive victories, including the battles of Montenotte, Lodi, and Castiglione. The Battle of Arcole in November 1796 was a major turning point in the Italian campaign. Despite facing a larger Austrian army, Napoleon's forces emerged victorious thanks to his daring tactics and ability to motivate his troops. This win solidified his reputation as a brilliant military leader. As the French army marched through Italy, Napoleon aimed to gain the support of the local people. He presented himself as a liberator, freeing them from Austrian oppression. He established new republics and implemented reforms to improve education, infrastructure, and equality. The Italian campaign concluded with the Treaty of Campo Formio in October 1797, which forced Austria to give up control of northern Italy. This marked a significant victory for France, strengthening its position in Europe. Napoleon's achievements in the Italian campaign earned him admiration and respect across Europe, establishing him as one of history's greatest military commanders. In 1798, Napoleon embarked on a grand expedition to Egypt. His goal was to weaken British influence in the region and establish a French presence. With a massive fleet and a formidable army, Napoleon set sail for Egypt. But it wasn't just about military conquest for him. He also brought along scholars, scientists, and artists to study the culture and resources of Egypt. Upon arrival, Napoleon's forces swiftly took control of Alexandria and marched towards Cairo. They faced their first major challenge at the Battle of the Pyramids, where they managed to defeat the Egyptian Mamluk forces despite being outnumbered. However, their victory was short-lived. as the British Royal Navy destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, leaving Napoleon's army stranded in Egypt. Undeterred, Napoleon pressed on, occupying Cairo and attempting to modernize the country. He introduced new laws, established a printing press, and promoted scientific research. However, his efforts faced difficulties, including supply shortages and resistance from the locals. Nonetheless, the Egyptian expedition remains a significant chapter in Napoleon's career and the history of Egypt. In 1799, Napoleon made a failed attempt to invade Ottoman-controlled Syria, which ended up weakening his position in Egypt even more. With pressure mounting from local resistance and the British forces, Napoleon decided to go back to France, leaving his troops behind under the command of General Jean-Baptiste Kleber. Although the Egyptian expedition didn't achieve its strategic goals, it had a lasting impact on Egypt and the wider region. The scientific discoveries made by French scholars contributed to the field of Egyptology and sparked a renewed interest in ancient Egyptian culture in Europe. Moreover, the expedition's legacy played a role in shaping Egypt's future, as it aimed to modernize and adapt to the changing political landscape of the 19th century. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803–1815, were a series of conflicts where the French Empire, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, fought against a shifting coalition of European powers. These wars were characterized by unprecedented violence and upheaval, and also resulted in significant territorial expansion for France. Napoleon's military brilliance and his innovative strategies during these campaigns had a profound impact on the nature of warfare and left a lasting mark on European history. The War of the Third Coalition, 1803–1806, marked the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars, with Napoleon facing off against an alliance of Austria, Russia, and Britain. One of the most famous battles of this war was the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors. This remarkable French victory against Austria and Russia showcased Napoleon's tactical genius and solidified his reputation as one of the greatest military leaders in history. The War of the Fourth Coalition, 1806–1807, saw a new alliance forming against France, including Prussia, Russia, and Britain. Despite the defeat in the Third Coalition, Napoleon achieved a series of victories in this war, such as the battles of Jena Auerstedt and Eylau, which further expanded French influence in Europe. The war concluded with the treaties of Tilsit in 1807, which compelled Prussia and Russia to become French allies. The Peninsular War, 1808–1844, began when Napoleon invaded Spain to enforce the Continental System, a blockade aimed at weakening Britain's economy. However, the French forces encountered strong resistance from the Spanish population and faced a British army led by Sir Arthur Wellesley, later known as the Duke of Wellington. The Peninsular War turned into a prolonged and costly struggle for Napoleon, ultimately weakening his empire and undermining his authority. The War of the Fifth Coalition, 1809, saw Austria once again declare war on France in an attempt to regain lost territories. Napoleon faced initial setbacks but ultimately defeated the Austrian forces at the Battle of Wagram, which led to the signing of the Treaty of Schönbrunn and the expansion of French territory. However, his disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 proved to be a turning point in the Napoleonic Wars, as the harsh winter, logistical challenges, and fierce Russian resistance led to the decimation of the Grande Armée and the beginning of the decline of his empire. A new coalition formed against Napoleon, leading to his abdication and exile to the island of Elba in 1814. Although he briefly regained power during the 100 Days, his final defeat came at the Battle of Waterloo, where he was forced to abdicate once again and was exiled to the island of St. Helena for the remainder of his life. The Napoleonic Wars had a profound impact on Europe and the world, shaping the political and cultural landscape for decades to come and influencing warfare for generations to come, thanks to Napoleon's military innovations and tactical genius. In 1804, after a series of military victories and political consolidation, Napoleon Bonaparte decided to become Emperor of the French instead of First Consul. This marked a new era for both Napoleon and France, as the First French Empire brought about ambitious reforms and extensive territorial expansion. The coronation took place on December 2, 1804, at the historic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. It was a grand event, meticulously planned to highlight the importance of Napoleon's new role and legitimize his rule. Many important figures attended, including Pope Pius VII, who was invited to oversee the ceremony, symbolizing a reconciliation between France and the Catholic Church. However, Napoleon broke tradition by crowning himself during the ceremony, demonstrating his determination to assert his authority. By placing the crown on his head, he made it clear that his power came from his accomplishments and the support of the French people, rather than from divine right or the Church's approval. During the coronation ceremony, Napoleon's wife, Josephine, was also crowned Empress, which further solidified the imperial status of the Bonaparte family. This event marked a significant moment in French history, as it signaled the end of the revolutionary period and the establishment of a new imperial order. After the coronation, Napoleon implemented a series of reforms aimed at modernizing and strengthening the French state, which impacted various aspects of French society, including the legal system, education, infrastructure, and the economy. As emperor, Napoleon's authority and influence grew considerably, allowing him to implement these ambitious changes and further consolidate his power. The coronation of Napoleon as Emperor of the French was a pivotal moment in his career and the history of France, representing the culmination of his rise to power and the beginning of a new chapter in the nation's history. Under Napoleon's rule, France experienced significant changes and achieved unprecedented levels of power and influence, shaping the course of European history for years to come. One of Napoleon's most significant achievements as Emperor of the French was the establishment of the Napoleonic Code, which sought to reform and modernize the French legal system. Before its introduction, France's legal system was a complex and confusing patchwork of feudal laws, royal edicts, and local customs, which made the administration of justice difficult and often led to the unequal treatment of citizens. Napoleon recognized the importance of having a consistent and fair legal system, so he asked a group of legal experts to create a new civil code. The Napoleonic Code was intended to be easy to understand and accessible to everyone. It was based on the principles of the French Revolution, which emphasized equality, individual rights, and the protection of private property. The code covered a wide range of legal matters, including civil rights, contracts, family law, and property rights. Some of the key features of the Napoleonic Code included the elimination of feudal privileges and the establishment of equal rights for all citizens, regardless of their social status. It also guaranteed individual property rights, allowing citizens to own, buy, and sell property without interference. The code also introduced a standardized system of contracts, making it easier for businesses to engage in commerce. Additionally, it simplified family law, making changes to marriage, divorce, and inheritance laws to ensure fairness and protect the rights of women and children. While the Napoleonic Code was a significant improvement in terms of legal reform, it did have some shortcomings. For instance, women's rights were limited in certain areas, such as their ability to enter into contracts or initiate divorce proceedings without their husband's consent. However, the Napoleonic Code was not just a significant milestone in the development of modern legal systems, but it also had a profound impact beyond the borders of France. As Napoleon's empire expanded, the code was enforced in conquered territories and influenced the legal systems of countries like Spain, Italy, and Germany. Even after Napoleon's downfall, the principles of the Napoleonic Code continued to shape legal systems worldwide, leaving a lasting legacy of legal reform and modernization. At the height of his power, Napoleon Bonaparte ruled over an empire that stretched across Europe and had global influence. This period, known as the Empire at its peak, was characterized by impressive military conquests, territorial expansion, and extensive reforms aimed at modernizing and unifying France. Napoleon's military triumphs, along with his strategic alliances and diplomatic maneuvers, allowed him to establish a vast empire that encompassed not only France, but also numerous European territories. By the early 19th century, the French Empire consisted of a complex network of satellite states, client kingdoms, and annexed territories, spanning from Spain to Russia's borders. This expansion brought France newfound resources, wealth, and prestige, fostering a sense of national pride and unity. To effectively govern this vast empire, Napoleon implemented administrative reforms that sought to centralize and standardize the various territories under his rule. These reforms included the implementation of the Napoleonic Code, a uniform system of laws that provided a clear and consistent legal framework for the entire empire. Napoleon also made changes to the way France was organized and governed, making it more efficient and centralized. He didn't stop there, though. He also took on big projects to improve the country's infrastructure and boost its economy. This included building new roads, bridges, and canals, as well as upgrading existing ones. These investments not only made it easier for people to trade and communicate, but also helped the French economy grow and improved the lives of its citizens. Napoleon also wanted to spread French culture and values, so he supported artists, writers, and scientists, and encouraged new artistic and intellectual movements. This cultural expansion helped France become a major power in Europe and spread its influence across the continent. However, governing such a large empire wasn't easy, and Napoleon faced resistance from locals and the constant threat of invasion from other countries. These challenges, along with the ongoing Napoleonic Wars, eventually led to the downfall of the French Empire. Despite this, Napoleon's reforms and military successes had a lasting impact on the history of France and Europe, shaping the political, cultural, and economic landscape of the time. Napoleon Bonaparte's downfall in exile can be attributed to several key events and choices, but one of the most significant was the ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. This military campaign not only signaled the beginning of the end of Napoleon's rule, but also ultimately led to his exile and the collapse of the French Empire. The decision to invade Russia was driven by a mix of factors, including Napoleon's ambition to expand his empire, secure his eastern borders, and enforce the continental system, a trade embargo against Britain. However, despite his initial confidence in the campaign's success, the invasion turned out to be a disastrous failure, with dire consequences for both Napoleon and his empire. The invasion commenced in June 1812, with a massive force of over 600,000 soldiers from various nations under Napoleon's command. At first, the French forces achieved a string of victories as they advanced deeper into Russian territory. Yet these triumphs were soon overshadowed by the numerous challenges and hardships that the Grande Armée encountered during the invasion. One of the biggest challenges we faced was the logistical nightmare of supplying such a massive army across vast distances and through hostile territory. As our French forces pushed deeper into Russia, our supply lines became stretched to the limit, leaving our soldiers hungry, exhausted, and demoralized. Another major hurdle was the Russian strategy of retreating and using scorched earth tactics, which involved destroying crops, infrastructure, and anything else that could benefit the invading forces. This strategy not only hindered our progress, but also put a strain on our already limited resources. The turning point of the campaign came in September 1812, when our French army finally reached Moscow, hoping for the city's surrender. However, to our dismay, the city was abandoned and set on fire, leaving us without the supplies and shelter we desperately needed. With winter approaching and our army's situation growing increasingly dire, Napoleon made the tough call to retreat from Moscow in October 1812. Unfortunately, the retreat turned out to be even more disastrous than the initial invasion. Our forces had to endure a brutal Russian winter, starvation, disease, and constant attacks from the Russian army. By the time the remaining soldiers of the Grande Armée reached the safety of French territory in December 1812, our once mighty army had been reduced to a fraction of its original size, with an estimated 400,000 soldiers either dead or captured. The failure of the Russian campaign dealt a severe blow to Napoleon's reputation and authority, as well as to the stability of our empire. The weakened state of our military left us vulnerable to further attacks, and the costly campaign drained the resources and morale of the French people. In the years that followed, Napoleon faced a string of military defeats and political setbacks that ultimately led to his abdication and exile, marking the end of an era in European history. The disastrous invasion of Russia was the beginning of the end for Napoleon, but it was the War of the Sixth Coalition that ultimately sealed his fate. This coalition, consisting of several European powers such as Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain, aimed to overthrow Napoleon's rule and restore the balance of power in Europe. After the Russian campaign, the French military was severely weakened, and even Napoleon's former allies began to doubt his leadership. Sensing an opportunity, the nations of the Sixth Coalition launched a series of military campaigns against the French Empire to remove Napoleon from power and restore the old order. The war officially began in 1813, with battles between the coalition forces and the French army. Although Napoleon achieved some initial victories, the tide soon turned against him as the coalition grew stronger. By 1814, the French military was retreating and the coalition forces were closing in on Paris. Under mounting pressure, Napoleon made the difficult decision to abdicate the throne on April 6, 1814. He was then exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy, where he was given control over the island and a small army. During his time on Elba, Napoleon remained active in governing the island and implemented reforms to improve the lives of its inhabitants. However, he also closely monitored the events unfolding in France and Europe as the coalition struggled to maintain stability after his abdication. Napoleon's initial exile didn't last long, as he managed to escape from Elba in February 1815 and make his way back to France. This period, known as the 100 Days, saw Napoleon regain power, only to be defeated once more by the Seventh Coalition at the Battle of Waterloo. This defeat led to his final exile on the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the rest of his life until he died in 1821. The War of the Sixth Coalition and Napoleon's first exile marked a significant turning point in European history as the continent began to recover from the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars. The fall of Napoleon and the collapse of the French Empire set the stage for a new era of diplomacy and cooperation, as European nations sought to rebuild and redefine themselves in the aftermath of the conflict. However, when he regained power, the other European nations were alarmed and hostile toward him. They quickly formed the Seventh Coalition to try to defeat him once and for all. The decisive battle of this conflict took place in Waterloo, Belgium, on June 18, 1815. Napoleon's forces faced off against an Allied army, led by the British Duke of Wellington and the Prussian Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. Despite a hard-fought battle, the French forces were ultimately defeated, bringing an end to Napoleon's rule and the collapse of the French Empire. After his defeat at Waterloo, Napoleon tried to escape to the United States but was captured by the British Navy. He was then exiled for a second time, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean, where he would spend the rest of his life. Napoleon's final exile on St. Helena was marked by isolation and declining health. He lived in a small residence called Longwood House and was closely watched by British authorities to prevent any further escape attempts or a return to power. Despite these restrictions, Napoleon remained active and involved, writing his memoirs and reflecting on his life and legacy. Napoleon Bonaparte passed away in St. Helena on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51. His death marked the end of a turbulent and transformative era in European history, as well as the life of one of the most influential and controversial figures of his time. Although his empire had crumbled and his dreams of conquest had been shattered, Napoleon's impact on Europe and the world would continue to shape the course of history for generations to come. The Battle of Waterloo, which took place on June 18, 1815, was a significant clash between Napoleon Bonaparte's French forces and the armies of the Seventh Coalition, led by the Duke of Wellington and Field Marshal von Blücher. This battle not only marked the end of Napoleon's 100 Days and his final attempt to seize power, but it also had long-lasting effects on European politics and the course of history. Both sides understood that the outcome of this battle would have profound implications for the future of Europe. Napoleon had recently escaped from his first exile in Elba and managed to regain control of the French government, causing concern among the other European powers. The Seventh Coalition, consisting of nations such as Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, had united to counter Napoleon's return and reinstate the Bourbon monarchy in France. The battle itself was a grueling and fiercely contested struggle, with heavy casualties suffered by both sides throughout the day. Initially, the French forces made some headway against the British and their allies, but the situation changed when the Prussian army arrived to support the coalition forces. This well-timed intervention, coupled with strategic errors made by Napoleon and his commanders, ultimately led to the defeat of the French. The impact of the Battle of Waterloo extended far beyond the battlefield, shaping the course of history. After Napoleon's forces were defeated and his dreams of power were shattered, he had no choice but to abdicate the throne once again. This led to his final exile on the remote island of St. Helena. Meanwhile, the Bourbon monarchy was restored in France, with King Louis XVIII reclaiming the throne. The aftermath of the battle brought significant changes to the political landscape of Europe. The Congress of Vienna, which was called to redraw the map of Europe after the Napoleonic Wars, established a new balance of power on the continent. The major powers agreed to a system of cooperation and mutual defense called the Concert of Europe, aiming to prevent the rise of another dominant force like Napoleon's France. Waterloo also had a profound impact on the national identities and military traditions of the countries involved. In Britain, the victory was hailed as a testament to British determination and resilience. In Prussia and other German states, it fostered a sense of national unity and pride. The battle also marked the end of an era of large-scale set-piece battles in European warfare, as military tactics and technology evolved in the following decades. The Battle of Waterloo and its consequences continue to be a defining moment in European history. Napoleon's defeat and the end of the Napoleonic Wars set the stage for a new era of diplomacy, cooperation, and relative peace in Europe. The battle's legacy lives on not only in the political transformations it brought about, but also in the countless stories, legends, and artworks inspired by the dramatic events of that fateful day. After his defeat at the Battle of Waterloo and subsequent abdication, Napoleon Bonaparte was sent to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. This marked the end of his turbulent career and the start of a quieter phase of his life. St. Helena, located over 1,800 kilometers away from any other land, was chosen as his final place of exile due to its isolation and the difficulty of escape. The British government closely monitored Napoleon to prevent any further attempts to regain power. In October 1815, Napoleon arrived at St. Helena and settled in a modest residence called Longwood House, which had a small garden. The living conditions on the island were far from ideal, with a damp and windy climate and limited resources. Despite these challenges and constant surveillance, Napoleon managed to maintain his dignity and composure throughout his exile. He engaged in activities such as gardening, reading, and writing, while also reflecting on his life and career. Napoleon had discussions with those around him, and these conversations were later recorded and published, offering valuable insights into his thoughts and perspectives during his final years. One of his significant undertakings during exile was writing his memoirs, with the assistance of his companions and former generals. He meticulously chronicled his military campaigns, political achievements, and personal relationships. These memoirs, even though they were not finished when he passed away, were later published and became an important primary source for historians studying the Napoleonic era. Napoleon's health started to decline during his exile, with various health issues, like stomach problems and possibly cancer affecting his body. He passed away on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, with the official cause of death being recorded as stomach cancer. However, some theories suggest that he might have been poisoned, though this is still debated among historians. Napoleon's exile in St. Helena and his eventual death marked the end of an extraordinary life and career that greatly influenced European history. Even though his empire had crumbled, and his dreams of conquest had been thwarted. His legacy would continue long after his death. The political, military, and cultural changes he had set in motion would continue to shape Europe and the world, ensuring that the story of Napoleon Bonaparte would remain a captivating subject of study for future generations. Napoleon Bonaparte's influence on the world was immense, extending beyond France to impact various aspects of politics, military strategy, culture, and society. His legacy in politics is particularly noteworthy, as he introduced the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system that modernized civil law in France and many other countries. The code brought about significant reforms in areas such as property rights, family law, and criminal law, promoting the principles of equality before the law and individual rights. In addition, Napoleon's military genius and innovative tactics revolutionized warfare during his time, inspiring swift and decisive campaigns and emphasizing the importance of concentrated force, rapid movement, and effective communication. His impact on military doctrine and the conduct of war has been long-lasting. Napoleon's conquests and rule played a significant role in spreading the ideas of the French Revolution throughout Europe. The concepts of nationalism, liberalism, and democracy gained popularity in the territories he conquered, leading to long-lasting political and social changes. Although some of these changes were undone after his downfall, the seeds of revolution had already been planted, and many European countries underwent significant transformations in the years that followed. Napoleon's reign also had a profound impact on the arts and culture of Europe. He was a patron of the sciences, and his rule saw the establishment of institutions such as the Louvre Museum and the French Academy of Sciences. The Napoleonic era also witnessed the flourishing of neoclassical architecture and art, which drew inspiration from ancient Greece and Rome. Furthermore, Napoleon's actions and the Napoleonic Wars had global repercussions beyond Europe. The conflicts disrupted global trade and led to the rise of British naval supremacy, which would shape the world for decades to come. In the Americas, the instability caused by the wars in Europe contributed to the independence movements of various colonies, eventually leading to the formation of new nations. Napoleon's impact on history is both extensive and intricate. Despite his rule being marked by war, conquest, and the collapse of his empire, the changes he initiated had long-lasting effects on Europe and the world. Napoleon Bonaparte remains a subject of fascination and study for historians, as his life and legacy continue to influence our understanding of the past and the development of modern society.